Good morning, everyone, and thanks for coming along to this session, which is the first in our series. Before we crack on with the business in hand, there are a few housekeeping points to take into consideration. You should all be muted. I've just been told by a disembodied voice that you're all muted, but if it looks like your microphone is not, please ensure that it is. If you have any questions based on Tim's presentation, then please do add them to the chat window, and we'll take as many as we can during the Q&A session at the end of this, and any that we run out of time with and can't answer, we'll make sure that we follow them up with you in due course. For your information, the webinar is being recorded and it will be sent to you shortly. So the best news of all, I guess you'll be thinking, because it is almost lunchtime, is that we're going to keep this session to 45 minutes in total. So to get us going, let's talk a little bit about Exceed. You probably already know about Exceed, and that's why you're here today. You might even know that it was established by Ian Mills back in 2005. But did you know that Exceed actually started life not, as you may have thought, as a Wells management company with an additional focus on performance improvement, but actually it started off solely as a performance improvement consultancy, where Ian achieved significant success by introducing some proven oil and gas performance improvement methods and processes to the offshore mining industry in South Africa and Namibia for the diamond giants De Beers. However, the Exceed of 2020 absolutely reflects the company's original growth strategy, which has always been underpinned by diversification of services and a broad international export footprint. And that flexibility has stood Exceed in good stead and has led it to become really one of the industry-leading specialists in delivering both well management and performance improvement solutions across the upstream energy sector. That flexibility has also been important when focusing on the general atmosphere across the offshore energy sector, because as we all know here today, COVID-19 and its associated economic downturn is certainly not the first crisis that the oil and gas industry has faced in recent years. However, crises, when the chips are really down, I think that's precisely the time when team performance becomes so critical to a company's success or failure. And it's those fundamentals that you're going to hear about today. But before we do so, I think we should rewind a wee bit to 2007, because it was then that your speaker for today, Tim Wigan, who is the head of performance improvement at Exceed, joined the company. So welcome, Tim.
Thanks, Rachel. It's great to be here.
So tell us a wee bit about your background and how you ended up as head of performance with Exceed.
Yeah, thanks. So background, I grew up in Southern Africa. I went to a good traditional boarding school in Zimbabwe, which had a real focus on leadership and sport and traditional values. And my plan was to go to university to study business after a gap year. My gap year took me to Australia, Southeast Asia, and the UK. And when I got to the UK in 91, some family persuaded me, probably based on an understanding of who I was and what I was interested in, that I consider the Royal Marines and the British military. I was fortunate enough to get through the selection process for the Royal Marines and went on to do 8 years in the Marines through the 90s. Had operational experience in places like Northern Ireland, West Africa, and the Caucasus, and just worked with a fantastic group of people. Decided after 8 years that it was time to move on to pastures new and new adventures. So I decided to go back to South Africa, actually to Cape Town, to complete a 1-year full-time MBA to harness my transferable skills, I guess, from a military background, and to decide what I wanted to do in the commercial world. So I got into management consulting, working with professional sports teams and corporates. And during that time, I was investing in myself and pursuing some professional coaching courses. And it was on one of those courses that I met someone who was actually a client of Ian Mills and Exceed, which had just started at that stage. So this was 2006. And the guy that I met was from De Beers Diamond Mining, and he recommended that I meet with Ian. So we actually met in Cape Town. And I was taken by Ian's vision for Exceed and his vision for the energy sector and oil and gas in particular. And I shared his aspiration for finding the right system and service to help teams in the heavy industries unlock their potential and deliver results. So I agreed to start working with Ian. I did that from South Africa initially on an offshore diamond dredging project, which was very interesting for De Beers Marine Namibia. And then subsequently as a performance coach on oil rigs offshore West Africa. So initially offshore Angola, and then for many years offshore Ghana. And back in 2012, obviously having worked with Ian and Exceed for a fair period of time at that stage, and having already started to develop our approach to supporting heavy industry teams and particularly oil and gas upstream drilling teams, I agreed to move over with the family from South Africa to Aberdeen to become a director and to help grow the business. So been here 8 years now, which is quite hard to believe.
Great. Okay, well, thank you for that wee bit of background, Tim. I guess right now is a particularly challenging and, as people keep telling us, unprecedented time in the industry. And what can people expect in terms of the new normal and how the workplace will operate in the post-COVID environment? So in terms of team performance, I think that's what you're going to discuss with us just now. So I'm going to hand over to you and talk to you at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen now. And the idea behind this webinar, as initially discussed with Rachel there, is to offer some thoughts about what has helped upstream teams to exceed their own performance expectations in the past, while also touching on what might be necessary to deliver results in the future. 2020 has turned out to be a pivotal year. So a fair performance-related question is, what are some of the key considerations when it comes to leadership, discipline, and teamwork as we return to operations post-pandemic? Simon Sinek, who is a well-known leadership expert, wrote a book called Start With Why. The why is our purpose, our belief, and what inspires people to invest time and effort in what we offer. It certainly prompted some introspection into our why. And at Exceed, we believe that with stable technology, strong leadership, and a structured approach, any competent team can achieve high performance. We're inspired by campaign leaders who share this belief and who are willing to invest in expertise to partner accountability and to unlock team potential. Success is always intentional, and accelerated improvement requires a deliberate growth mindset. Improvement is done on purpose. It's not by accident. We've been privileged to coach performance on more than 35 campaigns in the energy sector since 2005. And we are well aware that performance coaching support is an investment that client leaders need to invest their time and money in. They also have a duty to perform due diligence on a chosen partner to ensure that the partner is truly capable. So from our perspective, we continue to work hard at evolving and enhancing our performance and knowledge management systems, our coach competency, and our track record of delivery, along with client sustainability. So the return on a client's investment is actually the return on their leadership's belief in what is possible by the campaign team. This chart is a useful way to illustrate the value of a deliberate improvement initiative, which drives a strong start, accelerates improvement from there, and then sustains those results at a consistent level of excellence. In effect, the solution offered by Exceed Performance is objective accountability and bespoke system discipline, which is based on continuous feedback from completed campaigns. In other words, our approach to support project managers with building an excellent team is constantly evolving in accordance to what works best or best practice. The campaign readiness period is critical. Time spent in preparation is seldom wasted. Abraham Lincoln said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." A comprehensive enrollment and preparation period increases the likelihood that the first performance is done right. it is certainly likely to be a lot safer and more efficient than if the readiness period was not given the necessary time and priority. The time and cost saved on the first or only performance always outweighs the cost of taking the time to do it right first time. On a long campaign where similar activities are repeated, there should be a natural improvement curve, unless, of course, the team is not trying at all. Based on my experience, there are 3 key factors that can significantly accelerate that improvement curve for any team, and I'll go through those shortly. But in essence, the best we can do is become the best we can as soon as we can, and then continue to perform at our best through commitment to best practice, even or especially when it feels like we don't need to do the tasks that helped us become our best. In other words, avoiding complacency. As drilling and decommissioning campaigns commence later this year and into what could be a busy 2021, there is likely to be change. We'll likely see longer readiness periods to account for the increased uncertainty and for preparation and implementation of any new requirements to control COVID-19. Social distancing and travel restrictions might force the continuation of virtual workshops. So these should evolve in order to guarantee full engagement and impact. Indeed, the environmental imperative to be responsible about our carbon footprint, along with inevitable digitalization, necessitates better virtual collaboration. Excellence in this area will be a differentiator going forward. And then time, cost estimations, travel concerns, quarantine periods, and medical considerations are likely to continue to be a challenge based on supply chain concerns and government policies. So let's look at 3 factors which I have seen contribute hugely to performance improvement on past projects and which I believe will be just as relevant in the new normal. Now, they're actually fundamentals, but as we all know from any competitive experience, if we don't do the basics well, we won't get near our best. So the first factor is leadership. Leadership is about what leaders do more than what we say. Ideally, doing what we say we will sets the tone for a successful campaign. If key leaders are not driving the right behavior and the right focus, improvement will undoubtedly suffer. I recently read a great quote: "The world is changed by your example, not by your opinion." The best leaders take an approach of serving the team. They ask what they can do for the frontline team, and they listen and act on the feedback. I've lost count of how many times I've heard offshore supervisors vent their frustration about onshore leaders who feel that they should be served rather than serving the offshore team to ensure that they have what they need when they need it in order to get the job done right. Fundamentally, leaders drive the campaign mindset. Leaders who buy into the need for collective learning and growth always earn the respect of the team. Mandela said, "We either win or we learn." Failure is a necessary part of learning and growth. This requires objectivity and transparency, and these elements are only enabled by leadership maturity. Post-COVID, leaders will need to be compassionate and patient as we manage uncertainty and anxiety. Empathetic servant leadership adept at more virtual communication will probably be a good way to exceed the somewhat average and apprehensive team expectations prevalent today. Operational leaders will need to deliver frontline results against a backdrop of executive focus on cost control and energy transition. The second factor is lessons learned. This discipline has always been the most important leading indicator of success on any campaign I've supported. I'm talking about the whole emphasis on team learning, capturing all lessons accurately, discussing those lessons regularly between key leaders, and maintaining a closure rate above 80% from as early as possible on the campaign. This should be a weekly session lasting no more than an hour. If operations dictate, of course, the session should be shifted to later that day or week, but not cancelled altogether. The discussion by key onshore and offshore leaders should focus on prioritized lessons in order to make genuine progress to closure. Closed lessons should be either implemented or rejected. Implemented learnings need to be typed into the right planning documents so there is no chance of repeating mistakes because the lesson was forgotten or captured elsewhere. Now, digitalization will continue to automate the latter part, but we can't escape the behavioral discipline required to have discussions. A significantly underrated aspect of these regular lessons learned calls is the sense of trust and togetherness forged between client and rig leadership as they tackle trouble and agree team solutions for next time. So disciplined phased reviews ensure that all lessons are captured at the end of each operational phase, and these are then fed into the lessons learned register. This is the engine of deliberate improvement. The efficiency with which the leadership team closes critical lessons is effectively the accelerator on the slope of the curve we saw earlier. At a macro level, of course, we've seen the learning curve play out globally and nationally as our human race has attempted to get to grips with the coronavirus pandemic. We've no doubt commented on the effectiveness of comms between scientists and the politicians, and indeed whether there are any hidden agendas. So to exceed the expectations of campaign stakeholders as we get back to work, team members will be looking for transparency, openness, and effective learning in the changed context within which we try to operate. The Royal Marines have a strap line: improvise, adapt, and overcome. Improvement is progress, and progress is deliberate. Committing to the learning process, collaborating, and communicating the solutions is a crucial step to becoming our best. Post-COVID, there will be new lessons to learn. The sooner those lessons are addressed as a team and then solved and shared for progress, the better each campaign will be. Digital transition has been accelerated by lockdown. So there is now machine learning as well as human learning. Both require organized data. The third factor is about letting the proven performance improvement process run its course. There are certain leading indicators which can be agreed as good practice in any project environment. They are disciplines which work. The team knows that they are the right things to do and they drive the right results. But often these disciplines are seen as optional or sacrificial. They get compromised, which then leads to performance creep. An example of this is taking the time before every operation to go through the work instruction as a full team. This seems obvious, an obvious task, and it's sometimes sacrificed when there is trouble. But this meeting must be rescheduled rather than just distributing the instruction without discussion. Otherwise, the lack of planning will lead to more trouble. A client superintendent we supported reinforced the importance of a sweeper role. This is a role which catches the missing preparation or the mistakes that are made. For me, this role should be as objective as possible and should be responsible for driving the agreed disciplines which create the conditions for success. Good leaders empower the sweeper. Groupthink is a type of thinking which typically results in unchallenged, poor quality decision-making. It can flourish in cultures where there are egotistical leaders and/or it is considered impolite to offer alternative views. If healthy storming and challenge is not enabled and encouraged, a team will never achieve its potential. Furthermore, groupthink can lead to major accidents, incidents, and near misses. A high-profile but somewhat relevant example is the Challenger space shuttle disaster. Engineers of the space shuttle knew about some faulty parts months before takeoff, but they did not want the negative press, so they pushed ahead with the launch anyway. And perhaps the Deepwater Horizon incident also had elements of groupthink in upstream oil and gas. So a key aspect of proven improvement climates has to be giving everyone a voice, seeking suggestions for working smarter, and pursuing each and every marginal gain, even if it takes a little extra effort. Recently, the use of smart tablets and apps on board rigs and platforms has digitalized crew input. This is something which should be pursued across the industry to ensure concerns and ideas are more visible more quickly. The use of video, which we have as a popular tool in our Exceed process, can often explain in 30 seconds what hours of written reporting struggles to do. Then a logical, user-friendly, cloud-based collaboration platform, and ours is called iVision, can quickly share and access these visuals from the operations team to the engineering team. Relevant decision-making data available immediately and for posterity. Clearly, the urgency to have reliable and efficient internet communication for all frontline operations becomes more and more critical in the evolving digital age. Now, the All Blacks are one of the most successful professional sports teams in the world, with a 90% win rate over the last 10 years. And I say that as a die-hard Springbok fan. It's worth understanding what process the All Blacks follow to achieve that phenomenal stat. First, the team is greater than any individual. Second, the senior players are also expected to sweep the sheds or comply with the system. Third, they have a contracting strategy which unifies the team rather than dividing it, and they select for mindset over skill set. The biographies of Richie McCaw and Dan Carter are instructive. Start again each day, agree process goals, and focus on the leading process, not the lagging outcome. If the agreed process is not compromised, the results are a formality. Mood is a critical aspect of individual and collective success. Also known as climate, it will be especially important to listen to the concerns of team members as new teams are assembled for future campaigns. I was listening to an HR Exchange webcast yesterday, and they provided an insightful ABC about what motivates people: achievement, belonging, and control. This did resonate. We certainly emphasize the importance of recognition and morale. We try to create a sense of belonging, and by enabling channels for crew input, we give people the means to contribute to collective progress. Exceeding expectations by definition is only really possible when we truly understand what current expectations are. Exceed coaches conduct a climate assessment on behalf of clients as part of project readiness. It's probably more important now than ever before as we emerge from this unprecedented pandemic that leaders demonstrate a genuine intent to listen to the perceived concerns of newly assembled teams post-COVID. These objective interviews and surveys delve into people, process, and technology on any project. They're a health check to understand strengths, weaknesses, gaps, and blind spots. They also positively impact energy and morale by disrupting inertia. Listening to all represented stakeholders addresses stereotypes, challenges assumptions, and potentially builds unity. The Black Lives Matter movement has revealed some of this potential at a macro level this year. Peter Drucker said, "Management is doing things right, leadership is doing the right things. Exceeding expectations requires both." And actually, exceeding expectations is the second of our exceed values. We have the acronym LEAD: lead with courage, exceed expectations, act with integrity, and deliver world-class transformational results. Armed with a true understanding of the collective current reality, it is entirely feasible that leaders can create the conditions to build one team with one mission, right first time, and then becoming and sustaining our best in order to deliver results and exceed expectations. I'm now going to hand you back to Rachel for Q&A and conclusion.
Thank you very much, Tim. The thing I loved about that was the quote, "The world is changed by your example and not by your opinion." I think there are millions of keyboard warriors out there just now who should take that on board for sure. But thank you very much, and thank you to those of you who have sent in questions. If I pick out the first one for you, Tim, which asks, many see the COVID lockdown period as a massive negative. Are there any positives that you can see that have come out of this time?
Yeah, great question. I think an obvious positive that everyone has been experiencing is the degree to which we perhaps didn't appreciate what we took for granted before the lockdown. So the ability to travel, the ability to go and see distant loved ones, the ability to go to the shops, the ability to get a haircut, the ability to go and sit with friends and have dinner at a restaurant or a pub. You know, I think at a personal level, the positive has been a realization that we did take a lot for granted. I think another positive is the fact that we've connected with our immediate loved ones and our families, perhaps more than we were doing in the past. I certainly know that I was very busy and traveling a fair amount. And so this forced lockdown period has been an opportunity to connect with my children at a level that perhaps I was overlooking in the past. From an organizational perspective, I think perhaps a silver lining of this large, dark coronavirus cloud has been, again, that family introspection as an organizational family, getting a sense of where we're at, appreciating that we're going to face some significant challenges, agreeing a strategy, making sure that everyone is looked after within the organization, and then deciding how we prepare ourselves for perhaps a changed context as we emerge from this lockdown. I think virtual collaboration and digital transition are also some positives that have come out of this period. We were all aware of these virtual collaboration platforms, and Rachel, you and I have talked about this a few times. We weren't using many of the virtual platforms to the degree that we could have, and of course this lockdown has forced us to get familiar with the technology, get familiar with the platforms, and use them to good effect. So let's face it, a big positive will be that as we emerge from lockdown, and even as social distancing is reduced and we're able to get together as groups, which I still believe, by the way, is a really important aspect of building a strong team with a strong focus. We now have confidence in the contingency option, which is virtual collaboration using the tools at our disposal. And the final point that I did touch on is digital transition. I think the oil and gas industry, the energy sector, and in general, we've talked about digital transition for a long time. And this lockdown has perhaps accelerated that process, which is important because it's going to happen. And what we need to do is understand how we can use digital processes to complement other processes that we have, and to automate what needs automating to add value to organizations.
Okay, thank you. I think the second question that I've got on the list that's come in kind of follows on from that quite nicely, actually, and it asks, in your experience, what are the biggest barriers to success for most teams? And I guess you kind of referenced some of those that have been resolved recently, but what are the biggest barriers to success for most teams, and what additional barriers will be relevant moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we're quite passionate about that question, because when we have a conversation with project leaders who are interested and have the maturity and the vision to explore options to support them in their aspiration to build a strong team, to accelerate the learning curve, and to deliver results, we always say to leaders that, quite frankly, the buck stops with them, and this idea of accelerated improvement is dead in the water unless leaders really grip their teams and grip the responsibility that they have to drive an improvement process. So I think, one of the first barrier that needs to be removed whenever we have a conversation, and for any leaders out there, is themselves, is to make sure that they demonstrate the behavior, the mindset, the passion, and the energy to make sure that they're not a barrier to improvement. So that was something that I referenced in the presentation, and I passionately believe that it starts and ends with leadership. Assuming that leaders are really on board, and we're talking here about perhaps the executive leadership or the onshore leadership if we're talking about an offshore project, then another barrier which needs to be removed is enrollment. And this is where I've seen some teams struggle in the past. Client project sponsors are fully on board with an improvement initiative, but then we fail collectively to ensure that frontline leadership is fully enrolled in what we're trying to do. And their voices have been heard. We've listened to them about what they believe needs to be done. And if frontline leaders, for example, drilling supervisors in an oil and gas environment, if they're not enrolled, an improvement process is really going to struggle. And so it's imperative that time is taken during that readiness to execute period that I talked about earlier to ensure enrollment across the project team and remove that potential barrier, which is definitely one that we've seen in the past. And to then pick up on the points that I made in the presentation in answering this question, Rachel. You know, letting the process work, and part of that process is the lessons learned aspect, which I strongly believe is the most significant leading indicator in lagging positive results, is letting the process work. Human nature is somewhat resistant to change, as most of us know. And so as part of the enrollment, it's to open the minds of project team members, particularly supervisors, to give the process a chance to understand that a continuous improvement or performance improvement initiative with steps as we've developed them based on feedback over 35 campaigns over 15 years, we've listened very closely to what project leaders and teams are looking for. And so the process that we offer is based on a huge amount of experience and research. And the process does work if it's given a chance. So a potential barrier is saying that we want to pick and choose which aspects of the process we adhere to. For example, we'll do the planning meetings, but we're not going to sit down and do an after action review because we don't have time for that. That will compromise the impact of a deliberate initiative, and we call it performance creep. So performance creep is definitely a barrier to accelerated learning and improvement and comprehensive teamwork. And the best thing to do is get the whole team on board, supporting the process, letting the process work, and being open-minded about the steps that will help the team pull together, will help the team feel recognized and empowered and contributive, and ensuring that communication is effective between executive leadership and frontline operational leadership, so that we feel that everyone literally feels like we're building a strong team that really cares about each other.
Okay, thank you. There's a question here which I think again follows on from what you've said there, talking about enrolment and getting people on board and accepting the idea of getting involved in performance improvement. And I would imagine that one of the key barriers will be, especially from a financial point of view, how do you actually measure and quantify return on investment? And that's exactly what this is asking. How do you measure the return on investment in something like performance solutions, which don't appear to have a, I guess what they're saying is a tangible product at the end of it?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and we embrace that question from prospective clients whenever we speak to them, because it's a very legitimate question. I think that there are many providers of a service that talks about significant improvement and cost saving, and yet there are many that struggle to demonstrate that. So we've worked hard over the years to really understand how, together with clients and client leaders, we can quantify and measure the impact of an improvement initiative. And there are a number of ways of doing that. I guess the most obvious one is to assign a cost and time saving that is agreed between ourselves and client leadership for lessons that are captured by the team. And I reinforce the fact that it's the team that captures the lesson. It's not Exceed. It's actually the team working together, embracing the initiative, being diligent and rigorous about capturing lessons and then discussing those lessons to get them closed, to find solutions, to get those solutions implemented. And if we can say that solution has been found by the team, it's been implemented through this process, and we can say that's going to save us 10 hours of operational time, and we know that each hour costs this amount when we look at the spread cost, then with agreement and mutual agreement from client leadership, we can say that 10 hours, which has saved us a certain amount of money, can be offset against the investment in a resource and in an initiative which is enabling that. Building on that, we've talked about lessons learned. WorkSmart, which is a way of looking forward and appealing to the team members that are on the project and asking them to think about where they've worked before and to suggest ways that we can be more efficient on a project. By listening to them, by capturing those suggestions, discussing them as a leadership team, being realistic about which ones we can genuinely implement for the benefit of the operation. Not only do we give kudos and engage the team members that are suggesting ways that their team can perform better, But again, we can quantify that implemented solution. We can understand how much time and cost it's saving, not to mention the potential safety benefit as well. And then armed with that knowledge, we can again offset that saving, that time and cost saving benefit against an investment in the deliberate initiative. And one other interesting one, Rachel, which we've found frontline leaders have identified as a genuine return on the investment and a time and cost saving, is the advanced planning meetings, sitting down, going through the work instruction as a discipline that doesn't get compromised. The agreed offline preparation tasks that come out of those meetings, even if that operation has been done many, many times before, I've yet to sit in on one of those meetings where at least one thing doesn't come up. And that list of offline preparation tasks, which then gets chased and supported by a sweeper role or a performance coach or someone on the team, to make sure that everything that we said needs to get done before we hit the critical path is done, and we feel confident that we're going into the critical path ready, prepared, everything has been done. There is no doubt that it has been proven to save significant time. So, there are 3 ways that we've helped clarify for clients and help the conversation with clients to be clear about where the return on investment is in performance solutions and a performance coach.
Okay, thank you, Tim, and thank you to everybody who's been a part of the session today. I think the Q&A part of this has shown that a topic like PI obviously really benefits from discussion as much as anything else, and for us, I think this seems like a great place to start. So look out for details of the next in our series. If you have further questions or simply want to engage more with Tim on this topic, then you have his direct contact details from the last slide in his presentation, and obviously those will be repeated when we send you the link to the recording of this series. So thanks again and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Bye.
Thanks a lot, Rachel. Speak soon.
Bye.